Hello everyone, welcome back to Full Ocean Depth. Last time, we took a look at how deep we could get by just diving down on a single breath of air. I don't think it was too much of a surprise that we weren't very close to our goal, but we did learn some important lessons. First, pressure in the ocean increases very quickly, about 14.7 pounds per square inch every 33 feet. We also learned that gases compress much easier than fluids, something important to remember if we're going to be bringing breathable air down with us. We also learned about how other animals manage to dive so deep, but those lessons won't be quite so important. We left off on the conclusion that reaching Challenger Deep on a single breath is simply unfeasible. So today, we're going to examine how to get more air without surfacing. We need a way to have air down in the depths with us. This is episode 2 of a 5-part series examining how humans were able to reach the ocean's deepest depths. If you're just tuning in now, make sure to watch episode 1 before this, as there are some concepts you will need to know from there that are important here. Before we begin, if you like this kind of content, please consider subscribing, as these are the most ambitious videos I have ever made. YouTube tells me that virtually nobody watching my videos is subscribed, so if you aren't already, make sure to hit that button for more of this. Now let's get into it. Back to our voyage. If we can just get more air while we're still at depth, we should be able to stay down indefinitely, right? Well, let's do some more experimentation. We've all taken a bucket into a pool and pushed it underwater. It takes some effort because the air inside wants to keep it floating, but it can be done. In doing this, you have effectively created what is known as a diving bell. This fairly simple contraption has been used for thousands of years, even having been written about by Aristotle. There are writings saying Alexander the Great used one, but there's no super reliable evidence pointing towards this. A similar contraption was seen in Pirates of the Caribbean, Curse of the Black Pearl, and it would have been realistic had Jack and Will attached weights to the boat they had with them. So how far down do you want to send this thing? 33 feet? Let's do it. Swim down and... Seems half the space in the diving bell is being taken up by water. That's because you sent it down to 2 atmospheres, and so the air inside is being compressed by the water, and is now twice as dense as it was on the surface, and therefore takes up only half the volume. If you had sent it to 66 feet, it would have been at 3 atmospheres, and taken up 1/3 the bell. And if you sent it to Challenger Deep, you see the problem. Leaving the bottom open allows the pressure from the water to get in, so if we can prevent that, we should be able to go as deep as we want. Enter John and Charles Dean, inventors of the iconic deep-sea diving helmet suit. The copper helmet was originally utilized as a smoke hood, but the two brothers realized it could be attached to a fully enclosed rubber suit, completely sealing the wearer from the outside world. Strap some weights to yourself and a rope to pull you back to the surface, because you are definitely too heavy to swim. And you should be ready to go. Or are you? The problem is the air inside your suit. When you dive to, say, 100 feet, the water pressure is 58.8 psi. But the air in your suit comes from the surface, where the pressure is 14.7 psi. So the water will be pressing against you to compress that air to 58.8 psi, and it does this by reducing the volume the air takes up to 1/4 what it would be on the surface. That baggy rubber suit doesn't seem quite so baggy anymore. Not when the water crushes all that air into your helmet and squeezes the suit to your skin like a pair of skinny jeans you outgrew 3 sizes ago. We need a way to get the air in your suit to equal that of the water around you. Enter the rotary pump. This contraption is operated by 2 people who turn the wheels on either side of the pump, which pulls air from the atmosphere into it and through a hose attached to your suit. You can control the amount of air you allow into the suit by a valve attached at the base of the hose to optimize your suit's atmosphere depending on your depth. You also have a second valve that allows you to let out air when needed. You seem awfully excited about this. Alright, let's get you geared up and... What's that? You want to go deeper than 100 feet? How deep? 250 feet? I like your style, pal. Alright, let's do this thing. Passing 50 feet, 60, 70, 80, 100 feet and dropping. Hey, you doing alright? You look a little woozy. Oh, look at that! 250 feet. Whoa, you sure this is a good idea? You're shaking a bunch. Oh, also, the crew of this boat I got us only let us join because I told them we would help out as sponges. So, if you don't mind while you're down here, could you just grab some of them? And you're tugging on the rope. Well, there you go. Back to the surface. Wuss. See, you're fine. Let's get you out of that suit. Oh. That was unexpected.
Hey, you. You're finally...
No. We're not doing that gag again. Oh, good. You're alright. I heard they stuck you in a decompression chamber. Don't know what that is? Well then, it's time to talk biology again. That, and some history. Air isn't just oxygen. In the last video, I used the terms almost interchangeably, but that's because they were essentially the same for our purposes at that time. Now, they are different. Air is mostly not oxygen. Only 20.9% of air is O2, with about 1.1% being trace gases like helium, hydrogen, neon, and carbon dioxide. Most of the air is nitrogen in the form of N2, making up the remaining 78%. That nitrogen is why you ended up in the decompression chamber. When you breathe, gaseous nitrogen enters the lungs, like the rest of the air, and enters the bloodstream in relatively small amounts due to its low solubility. When you're at depth, breathing the compressed air in your fancy diving suit, that nitrogen is compressed too. And when you tugged on that rope and got dragged to the surface in a matter of seconds, the decrease in pressure increased the volume of that nitrogen in your blood, forming air bubbles and hindering blood flow. If something like this happens in a joint, that limb won't be able to work. If a bubble ends up in your brain, you'll be paralyzed. Or dead. Probably dead. If you come back to the surface slowly, it would give that nitrogen time to exit your bloodstream without making bubbles. This is what divers call a safety stop, a practice in which we halt our ascent at a shallow depth for several minutes so as to give the nitrogen the time it needs to leave our bodies. When you got stuck in the decomp chamber, you were brought back to a pressure equal to that of 250 feet, so that the air would be equivalent to what it was in your blood, and then gradually brought down to 1 atmosphere. But if I'm not mistaken, you also experienced hallucinations at deeper depths. Nitrogen is to blame for that too, and it's got a name: nitrogen narcosis. Nitrogen acts like an anesthetic, so when you breathe it in while it's concentrated, such as at the higher pressures of the ocean floor, it can make you feel dizzy and unfocused, typically occurring roughly at 100 feet, although it can be shallower or deeper depending on the person. Personally, I get it really shallow. I felt the effects at only 70 feet, and I can tell you, the phrase lock in takes on an entirely new meaning when you have to bring yourself to narcosis-free depths while under the influence. But you had it worse. While at 100 feet, nitrogen gives the feeling of being a little high, maybe slightly buzzed, it takes a turn for the worse at your depth of 250 feet. It turns into body tremors, uncontrollable shaking, hallucinations, and a feeling of unbridled terror. Historically, helmet divers that went that deep reported hearing and even seeing trains at depth. But I can imagine your internet-rotted brain experienced things it was likely more accustomed to. While this information is all very useful to have, how exactly did we figure all of it out? Time for that history lesson. Bridges can be a complicated thing to build. They are often used to cross over water, and so the supports are often submerged. And to build those supports, an air pocket is needed for the workers. That air pocket is underwater, and like our diving bell, they flood at the bottom with water. That is, it would flood if it weren't for the fact that pressurized air was being pumped into them, equalizing their pressure with the water around them to keep it out. Pretty ingenious. These contraptions, called caissons, could be entered via an airlock that allowed it to remain pressurized. People working in the caissons would decompress themselves after a long day of work in the airlock, bringing the chamber to 1 atmosphere within a matter of seconds, like you did when you ascended. You can see the problem. Many of the people who exited the caissons experienced significant pains in their joints, and several ended up dying within minutes or hours of leaving. The hunched posture they would develop from the pain got the nickname the bends, after an, at the time, popular posture called the Grecian bend. This nickname is still used today, and it's what you experienced after your journey to 250 feet. Of course, it wasn't profitable to have your employees in significant pain and dying as a result of their jobs, so experts were brought in. They observed that pain never occurred while within the pressurized caisson, and those experiencing the bends would be relieved of their pain when re-entering the caisson. They found out that by gradually decreasing pressure in the airlock would make the symptoms much more mild or completely disappear altogether. Decompression chambers became a regular tool at the work sites as well, so as to treat those that were unable to decompress correctly in the airlock. Today, the most common method of breathing compressed air is by scuba, which stands for Self-Contained Underwater Breathing Apparatus. Self-contained because a single person can explore the deep without the need for people at the surface pumping air down to them. A scuba tank is often at about 3,000 psi at the start of a dive, much higher than the water around it. The regulator, with its modern rendition being invented by Jacques Cousteau in 1943, allows air breathed in to be repressurized to what it would be at whatever depth the diver is currently at. Despite all these benefits over helmet diving, scuba divers are still subject to the same rules and must ascend slowly and follow the rules of decompression. Now, let's see where we are in comparison to freediving. The world record dive on regular, compressed air is 155 meters, or about 509 feet, set by a man named Dan Mannion. Now, Mannion was in the throes of narcosis at that depth, however, and doesn't remember anything while being that deep. Surprisingly, this record is less than our freediving record of 702 feet, as freedivers don't have to worry about nitrogen narcosis. If you look up the deepest dive, however, you may get results talking about a man named Ahmed Gabr, who dove to an insane depth of 1,090 feet. While it's true he reached this incredible depth, he wasn't breathing regular air. But that will have to wait until next time. Thank you all so much for watching. If you really like what you've seen, please consider subscribing, as I still have 3 episodes to make for this series, and I plan to continue making more fun scientific videos like this. Anyway, that's all I have for today. You all have yourselves a good one, and I hope you learned something.